Hey, what's up, guys? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. This is a big video right here. This is the Canelo versus Billy Joe Saunders breakdown video. This is where I break down the fight, I break down each fighter, and I ask all the big questions. I break down, what these fighters coming into this fight have done, rolling in. I also just ask the big questions. Can they, win the fight? Can they win by knockout? Can they win by decision? I also ask what is it going to be for them? What does it mean for boxing? What does it mean for them with a victory? What does it mean for boxing? What does it mean for them with a loss? So we're going to discuss all that right now and break it all down. Now, this is a title unification bout starting off. So, what that means is there's 4 major world titles that make up the undisputed world title in each weight class. Canelo holds 2 of the 4 belts, WBC, WBA titles, and Billy Joe Saunders holds the WBO belt. So the winner is going to be a 3-belt champion, and Canelo's goal is to become the undisputed champion at super middleweight. So that's what he's pushing for in this one. I'm sure Billy Joe Saunders would like to do the same thing, but we'll discuss if that's possible if he were to pull the win off. But we're going to jump in each fighter. I'm going to start off, as I always do, with the favorite and see and just break it all down. We start with the unified super middleweight champion, Canelo Alvarez. Now, Canelo is coming off of probably one of his career best wins. He moved from in between fights, from 175, technically moved back down to 168 and took on Callum Smith, who was the universal #1 ranked super middleweight in the world, the WBA champion, undefeated. He won the World Boxing Super Series back in 2018. So Canelo came in and absolutely dominated the previously undefeated Callum Smith, dominated him over 12 rounds, shutout, unanimous decision, and captured the WBA belt and the vacant WBC belt, and is now the unified champ. But then in February, he returned and made a mandatory defense of his unified titles when he took on Avni Yildirim, dominated him, 3rd round stoppage win, and held on to his titles. Now he's pushing for a 3rd belt in this weight class on his march towards the undisputed championship. So his plan as of right now is Caleb Plant in September if he beats Billy Joe. And then he's even talking about fighting a 4th time in December, which I would say, could be Jamal Charlo, could be Triple G, a 3rd fight with Triple G. We don't know, but, this is the next step in that process to find out if Canelo's going to be undisputed. He's already pound for pound king. Becoming an undisputed champion in any weight class is a huge deal, and Canelo has the opportunity with a win here. So, big time fight for Canelo right here. It really is. People should not overlook Billy Joe Saunders because you don't know him. He's an undefeated former 2-division champ, and we'll get into him. But, so for Canelo now, what kind of fight does Canelo need to have to put into play to beat Billy Joe Saunders? And my opinion on this one is Canelo needs to stalk and cut off the ring. That's the first thing. He needs to box. He needs to time his punches. All the stuff that Canelo does very, very well already. Billy Joe Saunders is a good boxer. He's a mover. But 2 things Canelo's not going to have to worry much about is Billy Joe's not a big power puncher. So I don't think, Canelo's got a great chin. So Canelo can take some risk to get in and cut that ring off. And, Billy Joe, he can be hit. He's not immune to getting hit. So, Canelo can work his way in, but he cannot lose rounds while he's working his way in. He cannot afford to lose those rounds. He needs to time his punches. He needs to throw a good jab. I'm telling you right now, against a good southpaw, a jab right down the middle is a key punch, and Canelo knows how to throw that. And Canelo needs to be ready to hit him with that little short left hook. That's going to be a good punch for him in this fight. Also, obviously, the straight right hand down the middle, but he needs to set that punch up. So, combination punches when he's able to cut Billy Joe off. Combinations are going to win the fight for Canelo. They could win the fight for Canelo. That's what he needs to do. He needs to just do what he's been doing. But he's facing a guy that moves and is a southpaw. Excuse me. Now, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but the last southpaw he fought was, I believe, James Kirkland. He destroyed Kirkland. Now, prior to that was Erislandy Lara in 2014. And I don't know if Billy Joe is as good as Erislandy Lara was then, but Billy Joe is a very good and slick southpaw. The question is he as good as he was when he beat David Lemieux? You know, because that was his career best win in December of 2017. He hasn't done a lot since then. So can Canelo, you know, is this the same Billy Joe Saunders? But the one thing we know for sure, Canelo is not David Lemieux. So Canelo needs to take some risk. He needs to go after Billy Joe Saunders and really cut the ring off, box his way in, set up those shots, those perfectly timed shots that he does so well. And he can win the fight that way. Now the next question: can Canelo win this fight? You know, can he win this fight? Yeah, sure. He's the favorite for a reason. He absolutely could win this fight. Can he win by knockout? I think he can. Canelo can set it up. Billy Joe has not fought deep into a fight to where he really had to dig deep in a long time. You know, I mean, you know, he had the fight with what was that guy's name? That Argentinian fighter. It was his fight prior to Martin Murray in 2019. He had to fight hard in that one. Got deep into the fight, but you could tell he was wearing down. Billy Joe Saunders has not been the most well-conditioned fighter the last few years, or in general. So Canelo, a body attack will help to wear down Billy Joe Saunders, to slow him down, and Canelo can definitely knock him out. I think Canelo could catch him earlier on and hurt him for sure and put him down, and possibly could stop him early. You know, I wouldn't completely rule that out, but a knockout, I'd say it'd be more accumulation punching and wearing him down, knocking him out in the middle to later rounds. But I definitely think that could happen. Can Canelo win a decision? Yeah, I absolutely think he can. You know, I thought Callum Smith might give him a tough one. And I thought Callum Smith was a pretty good boxer, and he is. But Billy Joe, being a southpaw, being a good fighter, he could stay away from Canelo, and Canelo can just stalk and do the same thing that Callum Smith did. And, you know, Canelo can win a decision for sure. He could win a close decision. You know, Canelo's going to throw the right amount of punches and box, you know, his way in, and he will be in this fight. And if it goes to the scorecards, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. But, yeah, he definitely could win by knockout or decision. What does it mean for Canelo, and what does it mean for boxing if Canelo wins this fight? Well, for Canelo, it's his legacy, obviously. It's big, you know. He pushes forward towards Caleb Plant for undisputed. So he becomes a 3-belt world champion. He continues his role as the pound-for-pound king. So for Canelo, it's another step in the process towards his greatness. So it's huge for him. What does it mean for boxing if Canelo wins this fight? Well, it's huge for boxing. Canelo's the biggest star, and a win here puts him one step closer to undisputed, and that's what people want to see. They want to see Canelo make history. He's a pound-for-pound fighter. He's the pound-for-pound king right now. So it's good for boxing if Canelo wins this fight and pushes forward towards undisputed and bigger fights possibly after that. So big deal here. What does it mean for Canelo? What does it mean for Canelo if he loses this fight? Well, for Canelo, it's a tough one. If he loses this fight, probably going to be a close decision if he were to lose. And, you know, it would slow him down, obviously, in his process. It would definitely take away of how great of a fighter. He definitely would not be pound for pound anymore if he loses. You know, it would really cast a big shadow of doubt over Canelo and how good and great he really is, to be honest. So a loss would be a tough one for him. He would be able, you know, because it's a decision and it likely would be close, I would predict that he would just get Billy Joe back in a rematch, he would get an immediate rematch. But you never know. You never know. So a loss would be a major setback for him, especially in terms of his legacy and in terms of undisputed going for it directly after that. So that would be tough. What do you mean for boxing if Canelo loses? I think it's bad for boxing if Canelo loses. Yeah, Billy Joe Saunders is a good fighter. He's talented and stuff, but he's not a huge name. So if a guy like Billy Joe comes out and unseats the pound-for-pound king, it makes boxing take a step back. Yeah, Billy Joe will be a new star. It'll create a big rematch, most likely, between the two. But, Canelo, people want to see Canelo win and keep pushing forward until he faces a bigger name opponent than Billy Joe Saunders. And that's the kind of fighter that people want to see possibly unseat Canelo Alvarez. Okay, so let's move on to the undefeated WBO super middleweight champion Billy Joe Saunders and the underdog. Now we're going to take a look at, ask all those same questions. First off, what kind of fight does Billy Joe have to fight to beat Canelo Alvarez? Billy Joe, and I say this all the time with underdogs, but I really mean it to, the max level here. Billy Joe needs to fight the perfect fight to beat Canelo Alvarez. And what does he have to do that? Well, why do I say that first off? Because Canelo is in his absolute prime right now. Canelo has been on a roll since the rematch with Triple G. He has. We're talking 5 fights in a row where Canelo has looked just insanely good and confident and rolling. The rematch with Triple G was a fantastic fight. Canelo was pushing the action, body shots. It was close, very close fight. Could have went either way, but Canelo looked like he was not afraid one bit of Triple G, and he pushed the action. He went on and destroyed Rocky Fielding when he moved up in weight. No surprise, but he destroyed him in 3 rounds. He moved up to 170, then he moved back down to 160, unified titles with a convincing decision over Daniel Jacobs. Then moved up to 175 and broke down the Hall of Famer and 3-time light heavyweight champion Sergey Kovalev. Broke him down and knocked him out impressively in the 11th. Dominated Callum Smith over 12 rounds last year, and then destroyed Abney Yildirim as he should have inside of 3 rounds in February. Canelo is on point right now in his absolute career prime. Billy Joe needs to box, angles, move. He needs to be one step ahead of Canelo. Every time Canelo throws a punch, Billy Joe needs to hit and don't get hit, slip and move. He needs to be the absolute best version of himself and then some to beat Canelo Alvarez in this fight. And his defense, he needs to, after he throws a punch, he needs to slip and get out of harm's way, because Canelo is a good counter puncher. He times his punches very well. Billy Joe needs to not get in trouble. And his stamina, his training, he needs to be on point. Because if he gets pushed into those late rounds, Canelo is going to hurt him and wear him down if he is not at his very, very best in the late rounds. So that's the kind of fight that he needs to have. Now, can Billy Joe win this fight? I think he can. I think there is a possibility. He's not it's a slim one, but I do think it's a possibility that he could win this fight and pull off the upset. His style, yeah, it's possible. Can he win by a knockout? I don't believe so. I really think knockout is very unlikely in this one. Even if he were to completely school Canelo and outbox and outclass him, Canelo's got a great chin, and Billy Joe's never been a huge power puncher, and I just don't think Billy Joe could even wear Canelo down in accumulation of punches. I think it goes the distance for sure. So I don't see a knockout. Can he win by a decision? Yeah, that's probably the only way he could win. If he wins a decision, I'd be very surprised if he won by a blowout. I really would. But can he win by a close decision? Yeah, I mean, it's possible. The possibility is there. I cannot rule that out with his style that he could win by, a close decision. Okay, what does it mean for Billy Joe Saunders if he beats Canelo Alvarez? It's huge. I mean, that's his career best win. That puts him, that makes him a name for the rest of his life. He's going to be a big name no matter what. A win, any kind of a win over Canelo will define Billy Joe's career. So, huge it would be for Billy Joe. What does it mean for boxing if Billy Joe wins? In my opinion, it hurts boxing. It takes a step back. Canelo's a pound-for-pound king. I discussed this. I said Billy Joe's a good, solid name, but he's not a huge name. A guy like him beats Canelo. It doesn't do for boxing what Canelo winning and pushing forward and getting to that bigger fight where a guy that people do know a little bit better, that's who they want to beat Canelo. So it doesn't do the same thing for Billy Joe. Can he win by... okay, so we discussed that. What does it do for boxing, or what does it do for Billy Joe if he loses? Nobody's going to be surprised if he loses. It's how he loses. If Billy Joe puts up a great fight and really, really sells himself, he could get more bigger fights later on down the road. He really can. Well, people are going to want to fight Billy Joe anyways. But if he goes in there and gives a great showing of himself, he leaves his name on everybody's radar. And that's what he wants to do in this fight. He does not want to be that just other British fighter that Canelo beat. Because Canelo's beat a couple recently. And he's beaten a couple overall. So he doesn't want to be just one of those string of UK fighters that Canelo's whipped the shit out of. So he needs to make an impression. What does it do? If he gets his ass whipped, though, it's not going to hurt him at all, in terms of, anything, because nobody's going to be surprised by that. Now, what does it do for boxing if Billy Joe loses? Well, it's not going to hurt boxing at all. People are expecting Canelo to win. They're expecting him to win, no doubt, and, and I think he's going to win. So, it's, most people feel he's going to win, so it's not going to hurt boxing. Now, Canelo's moving on to Caleb Plant if he's victorious in this fight. Even if it's close, he's moving on to Caleb Plant. I don't believe there's any doubt there. What does Billy Joe do? I'm predicting there's going to be a rematch clause in the contract, and I think Billy Joe would fight Canelo again in September or later in the year. And, possibly if he were to whip the shit out of Canelo, maybe he moves on and fights Caleb Plant or somebody else for the undisputed title or a bigger fight, but I don't see that. So now, what is my prediction? Who is going to win this fight between Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders? And how is it going to end? I'm predicting Canelo to win this fight outright. I think he's just better. I think he's in his prime. Billy Joe hasn't shown me enough in the last couple years that he can, he hasn't fought the competition that Canelo has. And so I think it's a big gap between fights. His last fight was against Martin Murray. He dominated, but Martin Murray was a shell of his best self. And, so it was no surprise to me that he dominated by a decision. But nothing that Canelo or that Billy Joe, I think that he does now, has shown me that he can maintain that. And I don't think he's going to. I think Canelo is going to beat him to the punch. I think he's going to break him down. I think it could be a similar situation to what we saw between Canelo and Callum Smith. I think Canelo, like I said, breaks him down. And I think Canelo's going to stop him, to be honest. In the middle to later rounds, I think he definitely could hurt him early. But I think he's going to stop him. He's going to beat him up. And I think Canelo Alvarez will win this fight and become the unified, or add a third belt. He's already the unified champ, but add the third belt and push forward towards the undisputed crown in September. So that's the breakdown for Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders as they attempt to unify belts on Saturday, May 8th in the main event of a big DAZN card. So I hope everybody enjoyed this. I hope you guys tune in. The undercard, I heard, is not going to be that bad. Is going to be pretty good, actually. There's a decent fight on the undercard. I want to say it's Kid Galahad going after a world title on the undercard, which is a good deal. Kid Galahad's very talented, so make sure you're checking it out. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. True Boxing, you've been hit with the truth.